Some of the most unsettling stories aren't whispered around campfires, or hidden in ancient folklore, or passed down through generations. Some of the most unsettling stories begin in places that shouldn't exist. Places with no doors, no windows, no sky. Just endless yellow halls buzzing with a fluorescent hum that digs its way into your bones. If you've ever stared too long at a blank wall, or felt reality stutter in the corner of your vision, or wondered for a split second if you were standing exactly where you were supposed to be, then you already know this. The world is stable until it isn't. Sometimes people slip. Sometimes they fall through the cracks. Sometimes they no-clip right out of the life they knew and into something else. A place stitched together wrong. Like a dream trying desperately to imitate reality and failing. Tonight, we're not talking about urban legends or fictional creepypastas shared for fun. These are stories of real people who found themselves somewhere impossible. Workers who vanished into hallways that were never built. Friends who watched another version of themselves standing in the distance. Endless rooms that hum with electricity as if they are breathing, thinking, watching. In these stories, the backrooms aren't a myth. They're a possibility, a glitch. A trapdoor that opens when no one is looking. A reminder that beneath the stable surface of our world lies something vast, endless, and hungry. So, turn your lights down, turn your volume up, and remember, if you ever find yourself in a yellow room that stretches farther than it should, with a hum that feels too loud, and shadows that don't quite match your own, don't run, don't scream. Just pray you haven't been noticed yet. Story 1. The New Conference Room. I used to joke that my office already looked like the Backrooms. Endless beige cubicles, fluorescent lights that hum just a little too loud, carpet that had been vacuumed so many times it felt more like fabric than floor. I worked tech support for a mid-sized insurance company, which is a polite way of saying I spent 50 hours a week listening to people describe their computer problems badly. You would think that when I tell this story, people would say it was bound to happen, that a place like that would eventually wear a hole in reality, that it is some kind of cosmic decor problem, like if you stack too many binders in one spot, gravity caves. The truth felt smaller than that, at first. It started with a memo. Facilities had sent an email announcing that a new conference room had been finished on our floor, room 6B, near the east stairwell. There was nothing interesting about it, except one line at the bottom. Please note, it said that 6B replaces the old file storage room, which has been permanently decommissioned. I remember that line because I had never seen a file storage room near the east stairwell. I had worked on that floor for 3 years. I could walk it with my eyes closed. There was the break room, the printers, the copy supply closet, the bathrooms, no file storage. I figured it was a mistake. One more example of whoever managed the building never actually walking through it. The first time I noticed something wrong, I was on my way back from heating up my leftovers. I had my phone in one hand and a Tupperware container in the other, absent-mindedly scrolling through emails as I walked. I almost walked right past it. There, between the printers and the stairwell door, was a conference room. The door was glass with a frosted center and the words Room 6B etched in neat capital letters. I stopped so abruptly that the sauce in my container sloshed against the lid. That wall had always been solid, I was sure of it. Gray partition, framed print of some abstract landscape, nothing else. Now there was a glass door, and I could see inside. Long table, 8 chairs, TV mounted on the wall. The strangest part was how unstrange it looked. No signs of construction, no drywall dust, no smell of paint or adhesive, just as if it had always been there. Facilities moves fast, a voice said behind me. I turned. It was Aaron from accounting, balancing his own container of food and a can of soda. Did you know they were putting this in? I asked. He shrugged. Got the email. Guess they did it overnight. About time. That corner was dead space. I almost argued, but I was already late getting back to my desk. I filed it away under corporate nonsense and kept walking. The second time, it was the sound that caught my attention. The office was never truly quiet. There was always the murmur of voices, phones ringing, printers chugging. Over it all lay the background drone of the lights and the air vents, a constant white noise that you stop hearing until it changes. I had been troubleshooting a ticket that had gone nowhere for 30 minutes. My head hurt, my eyes hurt, my soul hurt. I took off my headset and stood up, stretching. That was when I noticed it. There was a new note in the drone of the building, a slightly higher tone, like a fluorescent ballast, that had not settled yet. Not a buzz, more like a hum. It seemed to be coming from the direction of 6B. It bothered me enough that I walked over. Maybe one of the fixtures was about to blow, and I could convince facilities to replace it, which would be the most exciting thing that had happened that week. The closer I got, the louder it seemed. Not louder in a painful way, just more present, as if someone was turning up a slider on only that frequency. When I reached the glass door, something in my brain twitched. The carpet inside the room did not match the carpet in the hall. Ours was a bluish-gray, low pile, standard office fare. Inside 6B, the floor was covered with yellowish, patterned carpet that looked slightly damp. The overhead lights in there seemed brighter too. Too bright? They washed everything in a pale, sickly tone that fought with the cooler light outside. I told myself it was just a different color temperature, probably cheaper bulbs. I had already wasted too much of my break investigating it. I turned to go back to my desk. That was when someone spoke. It goes on forever. The words came from behind me, but they felt closer, like someone had leaned in next to my ear. I spun back around. No one was there. The hallway was empty, except for the humming door of 6B. I stared through the glass again. The room looked ordinary. 8 chairs, table, TV, that yellow carpet. Then I realized I could not see the far wall. My brain had assumed it was there, but now that I focused, the back of the room seemed to blur into the light as if it faded away past where the glass ended. I stepped closer, squinting, trying to force my eyes to resolve the distance. The hum grew louder, not in my ears, but inside my head, like pressure climbing. I blinked, and for a second the reflection in the glass was not mine. A man in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, stood where I stood. He was looking into the room, head tilted, as if listening. His face was shaded under a brim I could not see, but I felt him glance sideways at me. I staggered back. The reflection snapped back to my own, pale, tired, eyes wide. Too much screen time, I muttered, and practically jogged back to my desk. I decided to ignore 6B after that. It felt like a weird draft in an old house, something you acknowledge once, then pretend is normal. That strategy lasted until people started disappearing. The first was a temp named Jenna. She worked 3 cubicles down from me. Quiet girl. Headphones on most of the time. The kind of employee that seemed to leave no footprint. One Monday morning, her desk was empty. Her plant was still there. Mug still there. Sticky notes scattered around her monitor. No one mentioned her. By lunch, a new guy was sitting at her station, logging into her computer as if it had always been his. When I asked HR about her, they frowned, then pulled up a chart. "We haven't had a Jenna on this floor," they said. "At least not for the last quarter. Maybe you're thinking of someone from another department." I started keeping a list after that. Names I was sure existed, faces I could remember, paths I had passed on my way to the break room, a guy who always wore novelty socks, a woman with purple glasses, the older man who hummed show tunes under his breath while he worked. I wrote them in my notebook and put a tick mark each time I realized someone was gone. The ticks multiplied, always in that same corner of the office, always in the cluster near 6B. I tried to talk about it once, at happy hour. A few of us had gone to the bar down the street, and after my second beer I said, "Do you ever feel like people just fall out of here?" They thought I was talking about turnover. Everyone laughed and started complaining about management. When I pressed, asking if they remembered specific people, their faces went blank. It was like I was naming extras from a movie they had not watched. The last straw was Aaron. He was the only one who had acknowledged the room at the beginning, the only one who had seen the wall change. I started watching him out of the corner of my eye, like he was an anchor to reality. One afternoon, the hum from 6B was so loud inside my head that I could barely focus on my ticket queue. It was like my thoughts were underwater. I took off my headset and walked toward the break room, needing caffeine, or air, or both. As I passed 6B, I saw Aaron standing in front of the glass, looking in. Instinctively, I grabbed his arm. He jumped. "Jesus, man," he said, laughing nervously. "You scared the hell out of me." "What are you doing?" I asked. He shrugged, staring back at the door. "You ever notice this room seems bigger from the inside?" The hallway shifted, just a fraction. The fluorescent hummed. I could feel something behind the door, a pressure like someone holding their breath. "Come on," I said. "Let's go to the break room." He did not move. "There is no table," he said quietly. A chill slid down my spine. "What?" "Look," he whispered. I did. For a moment, The room looked normal. Then my brain adjusted, and I saw it. The walls did not meet where they should. The ceiling rose higher the further back it went. The table and chairs were closer than I thought, as if they were pressed against the glass, and beyond them, beyond the initial pool of light, stretched more rooms. Endless rooms. Yellow carpet, patterned and damp. Fluorescent panels repeating into the distance, humming in a chorus. No windows, no exits, just a maze of identical spaces disappearing into a soft haze. The hum became a roar. My stomach dropped, like an elevator suddenly falling. "Aaron," I said, or tried to. My voice came out thin. "Step away from the door." He took a step forward instead. His hand lifted, reaching toward the handle, although there had been no handle before. I grabbed his wrist. It felt oddly insubstantial, as if my fingers passed through the outer layer of him before catching the solid bone underneath. He looked at me, and for a second his face flickered, not like a ghost, but like a buffering video, frames misaligning. His pupils were too wide. "They are calling roll," he whispered. "We are not on the list yet." I yanked him back with everything I had. For a heartbeat, the world folded. The corridor stretched sideways. My vision warped, all straight lines bending. I felt the floor tilt, not physically, but in some inner coordinate system. We were slipping sideways, not down, not up, but through. Then we were on the carpet again, on our knees in the hallway. My hand was still wrapped around his wrist. The door to 6B was gone. The wall was solid. Gray partition, framed print of abstract landscape. No glass, no room, nothing. The hum cut off mid-note, leaving a ringing silence in my skull. Aaron stared at the wall, panting. "Did you see it?" I asked. He closed his eyes. Tears gathered at the edges. "I heard my name," he said. From very far away, we both filed HR complaints that week, though we did not say what it was actually about. I used the words unsafe environment and possible structural issues. They moved us to different floors. I still work for the same company, but I take the stairs now instead of the elevator. I walk the long way around any corner that feels too quiet. I never sit with my back to a wall that has not always been there. Every once in a while, when the office is particularly quiet, I hear it again. That faint, fluorescent hum, coming from a door that no one remembers, in a corner that should not exist. Somewhere, on some unreachable maintenance log, I imagine there is a line that reads, "Room 6B, permanently decommissioned." I do not think it means what they think it means. Story 2. The hallway between floors. My building was wrong, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. I live in one of those mid-rise apartment blocks that went up all over the city in the last decade. Beige siding, gray balconies, brushed metal numbers on the doors, 5 floors, wide stairwell, elevator that smells like old coffee and laundry detergent. When I moved in, I counted the landings out of habit. Ground floor, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The numbers on the doors matched the floors. Everything made sense. Then a hallway appeared that had not been there before. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because I was coming back from my friend Mark's place after binge watching a show we both secretly hated. I was tired, slightly buzzed, and scrolling my phone while climbing the stairs. I reached the 3rd floor landing, glanced at the familiar 3 on the wall, turned the corner to continue up to 4, and stopped dead. There was a hallway stretching off from the landing. That had never been there. Our stairwells were simple stacks. Each landing was just a platform and a door. Now, off to the right, a corridor extended about 20 feet, lined with 3 doors on each side. Each door had a number: 31, 32, 33 on the left, 34, 35, 36 on the right. I stared down the hallway, heart hammering. I lived on the 4th floor. I absolutely knew, that there were no 30 units in the building. The first digit matched the floor. 1s on the 1st floor, 2s on the 2nd, and so on. That was the whole point. Simple, clean, idiot-proof for delivery drivers. I checked the sign next to the stairwell. It still said, "Floor 3. Someone behind me clattered up the stairs. I stepped aside automatically, and an older woman from the 2nd floor trudged past, grocery bags digging into her hands. She did not even glance at the hallway. She went straight through the door labeled 3A that led to the usual third-floor corridor. "Did you see that?" I called after her, immediately regretting it. She froze with the key halfway to the lock, then looked back at me. "See what?" she asked. I gestured toward the new branch of the landing. "The hallway." She followed my hand, eyes sliding over the space. For a second, her expression went flat, like a TV signal dropping to static. Then she shook her head. "Stairs go up, stairs go down," she said, as if reciting something. "You must be tired." She gave me a strained smile and went inside. The door shut with a hollow thud. I was alone again. The hallway remained. My brain ran through possibilities. Renovation. Emergency exit that had always been there and I somehow missed. Weird dream. Maybe I had actually fallen asleep on Mark's couch, and this was my brain doing its thing. I nudged the edge of the wall with my knuckles. It felt solid. Painted drywall, slightly rough under my skin. The corridor beyond smelled faintly of fresh paint and something else. Something like damp carpet and old air. I should have gone upstairs. I should have ignored it, written myself off as drunk and oversensitive. Instead, I did what every character in every horror story does, the thing the audience screams at them not to do. I walked down the hallway. The lights overhead buzzed softly, not the bright LEDs in the main stairwell, but older fixtures with cloudy covers. They cast a sickly, yellowish tone over everything, like a filter on a photo. The doors were standard apartment doors. Metal, peepholes, deadbolts. The numbers were etched into small plaques instead of the usual printed stickers. I listened for any sounds from inside. TV, music, conversation, nothing. Only the hum of the lights. I tried the knob on 31, expecting it to be locked. It turned. The door opened an inch before catching on a chain. From the gap, a smell rolled out that made my eyes water. Dampness, mildew, something older under it, like air that had been trapped a long time. "Hello?" I said, because apparently I liked to tempt fate. No answer. I leaned close enough to peer through the crack. Instead of an apartment, there was another hallway. Same yellowish lights, same bland walls, extending further than my vantage point allowed. The floor was covered in an ugly patterned carpet that did not match the sleek laminate in our building. I could not see the end of it. Somewhere down that corridor, very far away, something flickered. It took my brain a second to process that the flicker had the rhythm of footsteps, as if light were catching on something moving at the edge of visibility. My heart was pounding now. I shut the door gently, making sure the latch caught over the chain. By the time I reached the main stairwell again, sweat had formed at the base of my neck. I took the remaining flights 2 at a time and locked my own door behind me, then did something I almost never do. I checked every window, every closet, under the bed, as if I were a kid again. Everything was normal. My couch, my TV, my half-finished dinner on the counter. I told myself that maybe the hallway really was part of some renovation plan. Maybe the management company had decided to add new units in the space between the building and the one next door. That did not explain what I had seen through door 31, but it gave me something to cling to. I did not mention it to anyone. 2 days later, a note appeared in the lobby. It was printed, laminated, taped to the bulletin board. Reminder, it said. There is no floor 3 extension. Tenants are advised to use only designated hallways and exits. Someone had highlighted the middle line in yellow. I stood staring at it while a delivery driver squeezed past to check the package shelf. "Hey," I said, "have you ever seen an extension hallway on 3? He looked at me like I had asked him if the moon ever came inside. "There is no floor 3 extension," he recited, as if reading from a script, then walked away. That night, around 11, I heard footsteps in the stairwell. They were heavier than usual, slow, measured. Not my upstairs neighbor, not the kid from 2 who ran up and down like a herd of elephants. These steps had the cadence of someone counting. 1, pause, 2, pause. They stopped at my floor, then continued up. Something pulled me toward my door. I opened it a crack and listened. The footsteps faded upward. When I could not hear them anymore, I slipped into the hallway and padded barefoot to the stairwell door. Cool air brushed my face. The stairwell light flickered lazily. I looked down, then up. On the landing below, nothing. On the landing above, nothing. But from somewhere between 3 and 4, I heard a door latch click, followed by a long, breathy exhale, like someone who had been holding their breath for a very long time. That was enough to send me back inside. The next day, the note in the lobby had been removed. In its place was a different one. Missing, it said. Under it was a photo of a woman in her 20s, smiling awkwardly. The name made my stomach drop. It was the older woman from the stairs, the one with the grocery bags. The flyer said she had last been seen in the building 3 days prior, coming up from the laundry room. I went to the 3rd floor that evening, against my better judgment. The extension hallway was still there. The numbers on the doors had changed. They now read 31, 32, 33 on the left, 34, 35, 3A on the right. Something about that last one made my skin crawl. I had never seen a unit labeled like that. The plaque was newer than the others, its edges cleaner. I walked down the hall, casting quick glances at each door. No sounds from inside, no light under the thresholds. At 3A, I stopped. There was a faint sound from within, not a TV or music, something more basic than that. The soft rhythm of someone walking back and forth, their footsteps muffled by thick carpet. My pulse thundered in my throat. "Ma'am," I said quietly, "are you all right?" The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the silence was absolute. Then a voice pressed up against the other side of the door, so close the cheap metal vibrated with it. "There is no floor 3 extension," it whispered. "You should not be here." The doorknob began to turn. I bolted. I ran back to the main stairs, up to my floor, into my apartment, and spent the rest of the night sitting on the couch with all the lights on, listening for footsteps that did not come. The next morning, the hallway was gone. I checked on my way down to work. Landing 2, normal. Landing 3, normal. No corridor, no doors, just the familiar fire door and the beige wall with the floor number. Only one thing had changed. The paint where the hallway had been was slightly off color, as if that section of wall had been patched recently. The patch was about the width of a corridor. When I pressed my ear to it, I thought I heard, very faintly, a humming sound, like old fluorescent lights. I moved out 2 months later and never looked back. Sometimes, when I am in other buildings, I count the landings. Ground, 1, 2, 3. Sometimes I still get the urge to turn right where there is no right turn, to walk down a hallway that does not exist anymore, toward doors that are not supposed to be there. And sometimes, in the quiet spaces between floors, I hear footsteps that do not belong to anybody. Story 3. The Yellow Wing. I work night shift maintenance in a hospital that is too big for the town it serves. It was built in pieces over decades, new wings grafted to old ones, corridors rerouted and rebranded whenever money appeared. Half the floor plans in my binder have hand-drawn corrections on them. Whole sections of the building are temporarily closed for renovation so often that I suspect no one remembers what they were supposed to be. That is probably why no one listened when I told them about the Yellow Wing. My shift starts at 10 at night and ends at 6 in the morning. I do the rounds, check the boilers, respond to calls about flickering lights and broken handrails. Most of the time, the hospital feels like a living thing, sighing and rattling in its sleep. The first time I heard the hum, I was in the basement electrical room. Hospitals hum by default. There is always ventilation, compressors, the faint whine of equipment that never turns off, but this was different. This sound seemed to come from inside my skull, a thin continuous note that rose out of the usual noise like a thread of light. I thought it was tinnitus. I have spent too many years next to loud machinery. I turned off the heavy stuff one by one, listening. The hum stayed. When I stepped back into the main corridor, it grew louder. It was not louder in a normal way. It registered somewhere behind my ears, a presence instead of a sound. It had no direction until I reached the service elevator, and then suddenly it did. Up. I hit 4, the top floor, thinking maybe there was a loose ballast buzzing away in some hallway. The doors opened onto the usual scene. Dim night lighting, quiet nurse's station, the occasional beep from monitors in patient rooms. The hum did not change. I checked stairwells, roof access, the ICU, even the staff break room, where a microwave is always on its last legs. Nothing. I told myself it was just me, that I was tired, that I should lay off the energy drinks. The hum followed me home after my shift, and faded only when I slept. The next night, it was stronger. By my second round, I could almost map it. It seemed to come from somewhere between the 3rd and 4th floors on the east side, which made no sense. That part of the building was simple. Patient rooms, flanking a central corridor. Nothing fancy. Except when I checked, I noticed something odd. The corridor on 4 East was longer than it used to be. Hospitals change, departments expand, walls move, but I am the one they call when they knock things down. I would know if someone had added 10 more meters to a hallway. When I stepped out of the elevator, the hum surged in my head. The overhead lights here were a slightly different color, warmer than the cold white elsewhere. It made the walls look yellow instead of the standard neutral cream. Not bright, cheerful yellow, the color of old paper and nicotine stains. I walked toward the nurse's station. The night nurse on duty, Carla, looked up from her chart. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You ever notice this hallway is longer?" I asked. She frowned. "Longer than what?" I turned around. The elevator door seemed ridiculously far away now, like the corridor had stretched while I was not looking. "Never mind," I said. The hum was almost a pressure now, not in my ears, in my teeth. The closer I got to the far end, the more it felt like walking into heavy air. At the end of the corridor was a door I had never seen before. It was the same standard fire door as all the others, but where there was usually a room number or a department label, there was only a blank plastic holder with nothing in it. The wall around the frame was painted that same yellow, a few shades more intense than the rest. I checked my floor plan. According to the map, that wall backed onto the outside of the building. There should have been nothing beyond it but air and bricks. The hum climbed another notch. My hand closed around the handle before I realized what I was doing. Carla called out behind me. "You probably don't want to go in there," she said casually, as if talking about the supply closet. I let go of the handle and turned. "You know what this room is?" She pursed her lips, thinking. For a second, her gaze slid right over the door, like her brain could not keep hold of it. Then she smiled, too quickly. "Storage," she said. "Just storage. You know how it is. Empty rooms, old equipment. If you open it, you will probably end up having to clean it." Her tone was light, but her knuckles were white around her pen. I nodded and walked away, heart thumping. The rest of the night, the hum nagged at me. It felt like someone humming through the wall in a motel, just loud enough to keep you from falling asleep. 3 nights later, a patient disappeared from 4 East. He was an older man, dementia, admitted after a fall. One minute he was in his bed with the rails up. The next minute his room was empty and the bathroom door stood open. The sensors on the bed never alarmed. The security footage showed nothing. They scoured the building. Stairwells, roof, laundry, every room that was not locked down. Nothing. I watched security replay the footage. At one point, the patient's door camera flickered, just a tiny glitch, static for half a second, then normal again. It happened at 3:17 a.m. At 3:18 a.m., the hum in my head swelled until it was all I could hear. No one else noticed. A week later, a nurse went missing. It was Carla. Her car was still in the parking lot, her bag still in her locker. At 4 in the morning, she logged a check on all patients in the digital system. At 4:03, her tracker badge stopped responding. They blamed the system. They blamed the cameras. They blamed her, whispered rumors about affairs and secret lives, but no one said the obvious. People did not just vanish from inside a building packed with staff and surveillance. I went to 4 East that night, even though it was not on my scheduled round. The hum started as soon as the elevator doors opened, like it had been waiting. The corridor's yellow tint was worse now. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a faint, disharmonious vibrato. On the wall outside the mystery door, someone had taped a laminated notice. "Authorized personnel only," it said in bold letters. Underneath, in smaller font, "Mechanical access." I knew every mechanical room in this hospital. I was not in charge of all of them, but I had been inside most. There was no mechanical access listed at that endpoint. There should have been brick. My badge reader did not work on the lock. The little light stayed red. The hum shifted, like a throat clearing. I put my ear to the door. The sound was louder. Not a single hum now, but a chorus. Layers of tones vibrating together, slightly out of tune, like hundreds of fluorescent fixtures humming in perfect synchronization. Underneath it, very faint, something else. I could not tell if it was voices or the idea of voices, a pattern that suggested speech without resolving into any words. I stepped back, dizzy. "Do not open it," someone whispered behind me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Dr. Hughes, one of the senior physicians. She was standing in the middle of the corridor, arms folded, eyes shadowed with fatigue. "You scared me," I said, trying to laugh. She did not smile. "Maintenance is not to access that room," she said. "Orders from upstairs." "Upstairs where?" I asked. She lifted her eyes toward the ceiling, then higher, as if the word was not administration, but something else. "They say the structural work is unstable," she continued. "Risk of exposure to insulation, electrical hazards. We do not need another safety incident." Another. As if the missing patient and nurse counted as incidents in the same category as a tripping hazard. "Has anyone looked inside?" I asked. She considered. "That is not our job," she said. Something in her voice made the hairs on my arms lift. Not fear, not evasion, something like resignation. After she left, I stood there a long time. Eventually, I did what any smart employee would do. I pretended the door did not exist. I skipped that end of the corridor in my rounds. I rerouted my walks. The hum found me anyway. In the boiler room, in the cafeteria, in the parking lot. Always faint, always in the background, like audio bleed from headphones. Some nights, it was so thick it felt like wading through sound. My dreams filled with yellow corridors that stretched endlessly in every direction. The only time the hum stopped, completely and suddenly, was the night the code blue alarms went off on 4 East all at once. Every patient, every monitor, every machine. The corridor became a war zone. Staff sprinted, crash carts slammed into walls, alarms screeched. For 30 seconds, my ears rang with pure chaos. Then, just as abruptly, everything went silent. Monitors reset. Patients stabilized, confused but alive. Nurses stood sweating, chests heaving, looking at each other like they had woken up from a dream. From the far end of the hall, from behind the yellow door, came the sound of someone taking a long, contented breath. It was not a real sound. It did not echo. It bloomed directly inside my mind like a thought that was not mine. For the first time, I understood. The hospital was a feeder line. Whatever was behind that door, whatever yellow region of humming rooms existed beyond our walls, it was hungry, and the hospital was a buffet. Not for bodies, for something else. Fear, perhaps. Confusion. The electric spike of a heart monitor when a bed suddenly empties. I put in a transfer request the next day. They say you cannot outrun the backrooms once you have seen them, that once a crack in reality becomes visible to you, it is only a matter of time before you fall through. I do not know if that is true. I know only this. I have switched jobs, cities, everything. I work day shift in a small clinic now. Bright windows, cheerful paint, no extra corridors. But sometimes, when I pass the electrical closet, I hear it again. That thin, constant hum. And once, when a patient coded unexpectedly, and then recovered with no clear explanation, I could have sworn the lights flickered yellow for just a moment, as if somewhere far away a door had opened, then closed again, disappointed. Story 4. Closer. Every loop. I started running in the evenings because my therapist told me to find a healthy outlet. At first, the only thing I found was that my neighborhood looks different when you stop driving everywhere. Side streets I had never noticed, alleys that slice between houses, shortcut paths where kids have worn tracks through vacant lots. My usual route was a loop, about 4 miles, starting and ending at my apartment complex. I would leave just before sunset, earbuds in, podcasts on, and jog until my lungs burned and my thoughts blurred. The night it changed, I had forgotten my headphones. I almost turned back from the sidewalk. Running without noise felt wrong, like leaving the house without your phone, but I was already outside, laced up, heart set on it. I told myself that a bit of mindfulness would not kill me. The air was cool, the sky streaked orange and blue. I jogged across the intersection, down the familiar street with the uneven sidewalk, past the convenience store on the corner. Without the podcast, I could hear everything. The hum of distant traffic, dogs barking, a TV through an open window. My own breathing, rhythmic. The slap of my shoes on concrete. It bothered me how loud my footsteps were. They echoed slightly, though the houses were not close enough for that. Each step landed with a soft thump that seemed to bounce back half a second later, as if someone were running half a beat behind me, muffled. I did not look back. The loop took me through a small business district, then into a residential area where the houses grew farther apart and the streetlights thinner. By the time I reached the halfway point, twilight had deepened into that strange bluish hour when everything feels too still. I usually cut across a small park there, a rectangle of grass with a playground on one end and a line of trees on the other. A path ran straight through it, lit by 3 poles that spilled weak pools of yellow onto the gravel. As I stepped onto the path, a low buzz tickled the edge of my hearing. At first, I thought it was the streetlights. They had always made a faint noise, but this was different, steadier, more tonal. It reminded me of an air conditioner unit or a huge server rack. The park was empty, except for me. I kept my pace steady, arms pumping. Halfway down the path, something caught my eye in the distance. The park bordered a fence, beyond which was a drainage lot and, further still, the backsides of several warehouse buildings. They were mostly featureless rectangles with a few security lights and loading docks. In the narrow space between 2 of them, where the lot dipped slightly, something moved. It was far enough away that it should have just been a shadow, a trick of light, a car passing behind, maybe. It did not move like a car. It moved like a person, or rather, like the idea of a person, stretched, tall, impossibly tall, just a dark vertical shape against the pale concrete, no details. I slowed without meaning to. On the next step, it was closer. There was no transition. One stride I was halfway across the park, and the figure was between the warehouses. The next stride, it stood at the edge of the drainage lot, at least 100 feet closer. As if someone had cut a piece of film out and spliced the frames together. I stopped. The hum rose in pitch, a thin whine I felt in my teeth. The figure stood at the fence now. That should not have been possible. To get from the lot to the fence, it would have had to cross uneven ground, step up a short retaining wall, push through a line of scrubby bushes. There had been no movement, no walking. One moment it was there, the next moment here. It did not have a face, not exactly. The closer it got, the less sense it made, as if my brain could not render it in focus. My eyes tried to fill in details and failed. At one angle, I thought it had a head with no features. At another, I thought it was just a vertical smear, like something had been dragged through the air and left a mark. I was not breathing. My body screamed to turn, run, do something, but I stood frozen on the path. On the next blink, it was standing under the first street light inside the park. The light did not illuminate it correctly. The glow seemed to slide off, as if its surface did not accept brightness. It cast a shadow, though, a long, precise line on the gravel, sharp-edged. The hum now was deafening. It did not come from the figure. It came from everywhere, the air vibrating with it. I remembered reading somewhere online about entities in the backrooms that only ever appear at the edge of vision, that slide forward each time you look away. Things you must never acknowledge directly. I realized, with a kind of cold clarity, that I had done the opposite. I had looked directly at it from the beginning. The figure took one step. I do not know how I could tell. Its body did not bend. Its limbs did not move, but the world around it shifted, the gravel indenting, the shadow lengthening, as if a frame had been advanced. I ran. The path blurred under my feet. I cut hard left, across the grass, ignoring the proper exit. My lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed me. I did not look back. Every instinct screamed not to. I reached the sidewalk and sprinted down the street, past the last streetlight, into the darker stretch. Houses watched from both sides, windows dim. My shoes thudded on the pavement. Behind me, my footsteps echoed, half a beat behind. Not echoed, answered. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The park was a block back now, the trees silhouettes. The path was barely visible. At the far end of it, under the last light, something stood. Too tall. Wrong. The distance between us had not increased as much as it should have. I faced forward again. The next 4 blocks vanished in a haze of fear. I remember the tilt of the sidewalks, the flicker of one particular porch light, the way my chest felt like claws were raking it from the inside. When I finally reached my apartment complex, I slammed through the front door and nearly collapsed in the hallway. Only then did I notice the hum had stopped. The silence pressed in. My own blood rushing in my ears replaced it. I slept poorly that night. Every time I drifted off, I dreamed of long corridors with no doors, yellow lighting, distant shapes standing at the far end that slid closer every time I blinked. I tried to tell myself that it was stress, that I had seen a person in the park, and my anxious brain had magnified it into something else. Our minds do that. They twist ordinary stimuli into nightmares. I almost believed it. Then the loops started. 3 nights later, I went for a run again. I stayed away from the park. I took a different route entirely, one that wound through well-lit streets and did a double back instead of a full loop. Halfway through, I realized the houses looked familiar in a way they should not. The same cracked driveway with the basketball hoop. The same 3 recycling bins lined up outside a blue house. The same chain link fence with the leaning post. I checked the street sign. It was the same street I had been on 10 minutes ago. I had turned left where I should have turned right. Or the street had folded on itself. Something. The hum started up. Faint, but growing. My skin prickled. I turned off that road, cut through a side alley, emerged on a different street, only to find the same cracked driveway, the same recycling bins waiting for me. Each time I altered my route, the loop snapped back into place like a rubber band. At the far end of the street, barely visible in the glow of a street light, something stood. I could not make it out clearly, but I knew, with the certainty you sometimes get in dreams, that if I kept running the loop, it would be closer next time. The 3rd pass, it would be at the intersection. The 4th pass, halfway down the block. I did not test the theory. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I stepped off the path. Literally. At the midpoint of the sidewalk, I stopped, closed my eyes, and walked directly across the manicured lawn of an unfamiliar house. The grass was damp. Sprinklers ticked somewhere. A dog barked behind glass. I aimed myself not at the opposite sidewalk, but at the space between 2 houses, where a narrow strip of gravel and garbage cans led to backstage yards. As my foot crossed from grass to gravel, the hum screamed, then cut to silence like someone had yanked a cable. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the parking lot of a strip mall 2 blocks from my apartment. The sky looked wrong for a moment, like someone had nudged the color grading, then it settled. I walked home on shaky legs. I have not run that loop since. I run indoors now, on a treadmill at a crowded gym. It is boring and smells like old sweat and disinfectant, but the hum never shows up there. Still, sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the big wall mirror, I see something behind me. Not close, just at the edge, in the row of treadmills across the room that is currently empty. A tall, vertical smudge, as if the glass cannot quite decide how many people are in the frame. Every time I blink, it is a little nearer. Story 5. Noclipped. I had never heard the term noclip until my younger cousin explained it to me at a family barbecue. It is when you fall through the map, he said earnestly, ketchup on his shirt. Like in video games, you glitch through the floor and end up outside the level where you are not supposed to be. He showed me a compilation video on his phone. Characters half stuck in walls, falling through endless gray voids, stuck behind scenery. We laughed. It seemed silly and harmless. I think about that word a lot now. I work in a big box hardware store. A warehouse, really. High ceilings, concrete floors. All the aisles numbered with big hanging signs. Lumber, plumbing, electrical. On weekdays, the place is nearly empty in the evenings. Just a few contractors picking up supplies, and the occasional nervous homeowner. My job is stocking and zoning, which mostly means putting things where they belong. There is something satisfying about it. Lining up rows of paint cans, stacking boxes just right. One Tuesday night, I was assigned to aisle 14, sheet goods. If you have never been in that section of a hardware store, imagine long stacked racks of plywood, particle board, drywall, and other huge flat things, all standing vertically in slots. You stand them up, slide them back, tag them. It is dusty back there. The air tastes like sawdust and gypsum. We had just gotten a shipment in, so I was by myself, sliding sheets into their places. The store's overhead music played faintly, some old rock song. The fluorescent lights hummed. Forklifts beeped somewhere far away. The first odd thing I noticed was the pallet. It was sitting in the middle of the aisle, loaded with drywall, but misaligned. No one had dropped it off. I had been in that aisle for at least 20 minutes, and no forklift had come by. There had been no clatter, no voices, no heads up. 1 second the aisle was empty, the next there was a shrink-wrapped pallet neatly parked dead center. I frowned. My brain did the usual lazy math. Maybe I had been in the next aisle over and not noticed. Maybe someone moved it while I was in the bathroom. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. I walked around it. That was when the store went quiet. Not quieter. Silent. The music cut out mid-chorus. The forklift beeping stopped. The faint murmur of customers and the whoosh of the HVAC vanished. The only sound left was the buzz of the lights, steady and too loud. I stood perfectly still, a sheet of drywall half pulled from its slot. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded flat, muffled, like speaking in a soundproofed room. No answer. I stepped to the end of the aisle and peered around. The store was wrong. It looked the same at first glance. Rows of aisles, signs hanging, displays at the end caps, but the color was off. Everything had a faint yellowish tint, as if an old filter had been placed over my eyes. The air felt heavier too, almost humid. "Mike?" I called. "You guys messing with the sound system again?" Nothing. No customers, no co-workers, no motion at all. I walked toward the main aisle that runs down the center of the store. My footsteps echoed more than they should have on smooth concrete. I passed aisle 13, 12, 11. Each one stretched away in perfect, repeating lines. Shelves, racks, products all perfectly aligned. None of the tiny imperfections you usually see when people actually use a space. When I reached the main aisle, my brain hiccuped. It did not end. Normally, from sheet goods, you can see the big sliding entrance doors on the left and the back wall with the receiving bay on the right. Now, the central aisle stretched out in both directions until it faded into a hazy distance, the overhead lights receding in perfect perspective. I picked a direction and started walking. "Hello?" I shouted, louder. "Anyone here? This is not funny." My words were swallowed by the space. The hum of the fluorescents rode over everything, a constant, unchanging tone. I passed aisles that should not exist. Aisle 27, 36, 52. Numbers higher than our store had ever had. Their contents seemed to repeat. Paint, plumbing, seasonal, then again, slightly reconfigured, like the same texture copied and pasted. Panic prickled my skin. I turned around. The view behind me was exactly the same, an endless corridor of aisles and light. I started walking faster. I tried counting my steps. I tried marking where I had been by knocking over a small stack of empty paint cans and then walking away, only to find the same toppled cans again 3 turns later when I could have sworn I had been going straight. That was when I remembered the noclipped videos. The way characters glitched outside the normal play space and ended up in weird developer limbos. Very funny, I told myself. You fell through the map of reality. Good one. I laughed. The laugh sounded wrong. Too loud, then too thin. Stretched out like taffy. I realized I had not seen a single sign of life since the pallet appeared. No other footprints in the thin layer of dust on the floor. No carts, no smudges on the gleaming concrete. Even the scuff marks that usually line the aisles were gone. Everything was too clean. Eventually, I did the thing you are never supposed to do when you are lost. I ran. I sprinted down the main aisle, past repeated sections of lighting fixtures and lawn chairs and power tools, my breath shredding my throat. The air tasted stale, as if recycled too many times. Every step echoed and came back to me a second later, slightly out of sync, like someone copying me a few paces behind. I turned left at random, then right, then another right. Somewhere along the way, the aisle numbers disappeared from the hanging signs. The white panels turned blank, empty rectangles swinging slightly in a breeze I could not feel. I stopped running when my side cramped so hard I doubled over. For a long moment, all I could do was crouch there, hands on knees, head down, listening to my own ragged breathing and the omnipresent hum. Then, faintly, I heard something else. A cart. The squeak of old wheels. The rattle of metal. I snapped upright. Down the aisle, far in the distance, something turned the corner. For a second I saw the outline of a shopping cart and the vague shape of a person pushing it. Relief hit me like a wave. "Hey," I shouted. "Hey, wait." The figure did not react. I ran toward them, waving. As I closed the distance, details should have sharpened, but they did not. The shape pushing the cart did not resolve into a person. It stayed blurry, like a smudge of darker air. The cart itself became stranger the closer I got. Too tall, too narrow, its wheels not quite touching the ground. I slowed. "Sir?" I called. The figure stopped moving. The hum dimmed around us, as if making room for another sound, something lower, like a vibration in the bones. The shape turned. I cannot describe its face. Not because it was too monstrous, but because every time my gaze tried to fix on where facial features should be, my brain slid off as if on ice. It was like trying to remember a word that vanishes the moment you think of it. I had the overwhelming sensation that if I managed to see it clearly, to put its image into the part of my mind that stores recognizable things, something irreversible would happen. "Sorry," I muttered, backing away. "My mistake." It took a step toward me. The wheels of the cart stayed still. The entire object, cart and figure and all, slid forward in a smooth motion, covering too much distance at once. I turned and bolted. This time I did not pay attention to aisles or signs. I barreled through displays, knocked over a stack of buckets, and kept going. The hum swelled, higher and higher, like a note bending out of tune. Behind me, the rattle of the cart echoed, sometimes close, sometimes far, as if distance meant nothing. I do not know how long I ran. At some point I hit something that felt like a patch of cold, thick air. My vision smeared sideways, like someone had dragged a finger through wet paint. There was a sensation of falling, not down, but through. Then I was standing back in aisle 14. The store's sound system blared classic rock. A forklift beeped somewhere. Someone coughed. A small child cried for a toy in the distance. My supervisor, Mike, was at the end of the aisle, frowning. "You okay?" he asked. "You were just standing there zoning out. I called your name like 3 times. I looked at my phone. The time had not changed in any significant way. Maybe 5 minutes had passed. My clothes were dusty. My heart pounded as if I had been sprinting. There was a smear of yellowish grime on my hands that did not match any substance in the aisle. I laughed it off, said I was tired, went back to stacking drywall. I tried to move on with my life. You can probably guess how well that went. It is the small things. Sometimes, when I restock, I find products arranged in patterns that do not match the planograms. Subtle spiral arrangements or repeating sequences that no human would bother making but are too deliberate to be random. Sometimes, when I lock up at night, the main aisle looks a few meters longer than it should. Sometimes customers mention an aisle number that does not exist on our map at all. "What happened to aisle 37? They ask casually. "We never had a 37, I tell them. They frown, unconvinced, then shake it off, as if a memory has been erased, mid-thought. Once, on my lunch break, my cousin sent me a video on social media. It was one of those Backrooms no-clip compilation things. People walking into perfectly normal doorways, then the footage cutting to grainy yellow corridors that go on forever. Text stories overlaid on images of damp carpet and humming lights. "Look familiar?" he wrote, followed by a laughing emoji. I stared at the phone for a long time. The images, crude as they were, matched something in the back of my mind too closely. A space glimpsed out of the corner of my eye, between aisles, beyond the storeroom, where the fluorescent light shifts a shade yellower and the air tastes just a little stale. I typed, "Not funny," then deleted it. Instead, I wrote, "Lol, creepy," and put the phone face down. Here is the worst part. Sometimes, late, when the store is closing and I walk the aisles one last time, I feel an urge to step sideways. Not down the aisle, not toward the cash registers, but through the racks, as if there is a door there that my eyes cannot see, yet my body remembers. A part of me believes that if I did it at just the right angle, at just the right moment, I would pass through the steel uprights, through the pegboard, through the expected geometry of the world, and drop back into that quiet, endless store. The place outside the level. The no-clip. Another part of me is terrified that one day, I will not have a choice. Maybe it does not happen because you want it to. Maybe it happens because the world has a bug, and sooner or later every object on the map has a chance of falling through. People vanish all the time. We say they ran away. We say they met with foul play. We say they chose it. But sometimes, in the quiet hum of the fluorescence, in the endless aisles that should have ended, in the hallways and stairwells and hospital wings and office rooms that appear where they should not, I think of my cousin's dumb video. I think of that word, no-clip, and I wonder how many of us are just one misplaced step away from disappearing into a yellow room that hums forever. You've reached the end of tonight's anthology, but some places don't let you leave just because the screen fades to black. If any of these stories followed you, a sound you thought you heard in the quiet, a hallway you suddenly didn't trust, a flicker of fluorescent light that felt a little too familiar, don't ignore that feeling. Pay attention to it. Subscribe to keep exploring the spaces that shouldn't exist, the moments where reality bends, and the stories that slip between the seams of the world. Tell me in the comments, which backroom story unsettled you the most? Which moment made you look over your shoulder just to be sure you were still here? Like the video if you want more deep dives into the unseen, the unexplained, and the horrors that wait just outside the walls we trust. And if you have a story, a moment where your surroundings didn't add up, a place you swear changed when you looked away, a memory that still feels impossible, you're always welcome to share it. Send it to the business email in the channel bio, and your experience may be featured in a future episode. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for walking these endless halls with me tonight. Until next time, remember, some rooms don't stay empty, some corridors don't lead back, and the back rooms are always waiting. And remember, the dark awaits.